His voice dropped mid-sentence, and the whole room went still. That's where we start tonight. Not at the beginning of the relationship, not at the end. Right there, in the middle of what should have been an easy conversation, something came out that couldn't be put back. She wasn't ready for it. Neither were her tears. They arrived before she even understood what she was feeling, fast and total. The person she loves most watched it happen and didn't know what he'd done wrong. Now every time the subject comes close, any version of it, she feels it waiting. The wrong word, the wrong question, the door she doesn't know how to keep closed. Also in this episode, a father sits across from his daughter, looking at photographs of her injuries. He's trying to understand how this happened. She says something she thinks will help. 4 words, casual, meant to explain. He goes silent. Then he asks her to repeat it. And someone else has been carrying something since childhood. A specific thing. Locked down for years until 16 when it finally surfaced. She's been in it ever since. 14 years of trying to outrun it. 2 years of actually facing it. And she's still not sure the ache got the memo. She's looked into help. She's been redirected. She's been told the people trained to help aren't trained for this. The Bales don't care either way. 3 people. 3 things they couldn't say out loud until now. Stay with them. The lamp on Nadia's side of the bed had a loose bulb. I'd been meaning to fix it for 2 months, but she said she liked it. She said the flickering made the room feel like candlelight, like we were somewhere older and slower than we actually were. That was Nadia. She could find the romance in a maintenance problem. We'd been together for almost 3 years by the time it happened. 3 years of her stealing the quilt, this heavy green and cream thing her grandmother had made that smelled of cedar and something floral I could never name. 3 years of her leaving her reading glasses on my side of the nightstand because she always fell asleep in the middle of a chapter. 3 years of her cold feet finding my shins at 2 in the morning, like I was some kind of radiator she'd been assigned. I loved the ordinary weight of her. I loved the way she'd hum while she made coffee. Not a song exactly, just a sound she made when she was content. I loved that she alphabetized her spice rack, but kept her bookshelf in total chaos. I loved that she cried at nature documentaries, but not at movies. I thought I knew her, and I thought knowing someone meant you'd seen all their rooms. It was a Thursday in November. I know because I'd worked late and I still had my work badge clipped to my shirt when I came in. The apartment was quiet in that particular way it gets after 8 o'clock. The street sounds going soft, the radiator ticking. Nadia was already in bed, propped up against the pillows with her book open, the flickering lamp doing its thing. She looked up when I came in, gave me that small smile, and I went to the bathroom. I changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, came back and sat on the edge of the bed. I sat on the edge of the bed to take off my socks, and she put her book down. She set it face down on the quilt, which she never did because she hated breaking spines. And I thought, she's going to tell me something, though I didn't know why I thought it. She said, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" And I said, "Of course," like it was easy, like I didn't know what easy was about to cost me. She told me slowly, not all at once, more like she was handing me pieces of something fragile. It was about her childhood, about someone who was supposed to protect her. It was about years of something she'd carried so quietly that I had lived beside her for 3 years and never once felt the weight of it. I sat very still, my sock still in my hand, not knowing how long I held it. The lamp flickered twice and then steadied, and the room felt both smaller and larger at the same time. Nadia was watching my face the way you watch a window during a storm, waiting to see what it does. I exhaled, and I said the wrong thing first, because I want to be honest about that. What I said was, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I heard it come out of my mouth and knew immediately, like when you've knocked a glass off a counter. It sounded like an accusation, like she'd withheld something she owed me, and that wasn't what I meant. What I meant was closer to, "I wish I could have been there," but I didn't say that. I watched her face do something careful and closed, and I wanted to reach back into the air and take the words apart. She said quietly, "I am telling you now." 3 words, so patient and measured that they hit me harder than anything else she'd said. She just handed me the most unprotected thing inside her, and my first instinct had been to ask why it took so long. I set my sock down on the floor, turned to face her fully, and said, "I'm sorry. That was the wrong thing to say. I'm glad you're telling me now. I'm glad you trust me." She nodded, and I don't think she cried. I think she'd cried about it a long time ago, in rooms I'd never been in. What she had left now was something quieter and more exhausted than tears. She reached over and picked up her book again, not to read it, just to have something in her hands. I sat there in the flickering light and felt the specific, awful guilt of someone who loves a person and realizes it's an incomplete picture. I whispered, "I didn't sleep that night," and lay next to her, listening to her breathing even out. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every time I touched her without thinking. Every time I'd come up behind her in the kitchen and wrap my arms around her without warning, and every time I'd reach for her in the dark. I'd never asked. I'd never thought to ask. And I'd just assumed that because she never pulled away, she was always okay. The days after were the quietest we'd ever been together. Not cold. We weren't cold with each other. But there was a new kind of carefulness between us, like walking a path I hadn't walked before in the dark. I made coffee in the mornings, handed her the mug, and our fingers touched. I thought, is this okay? Is this still okay? I couldn't ask every time, but I also couldn't pretend the question wasn't there. Everything I thought I knew about being a good partner, I had to unlearn in that room. I thought being a good partner meant being present, attentive, and physically affectionate. I hadn't understood that for some people, presence without permission isn't comfort. It is something else entirely. Love isn't enough on its own. Love is the reason, but the how has to be learned. I started asking, not dramatically, not in a way that made every moment feel clinical or heavy. Is it okay if before I reached for her and, do you want me to, before I moved closer in bed? At first it felt awkward, like I was reading from a script I'd just been handed. Nadia would look at me, and there was something in her face that I can only describe as relief. Not because she'd been afraid of me, but because she'd never been asked before, not by anyone. I sighed and got it wrong again about 3 weeks in. We were lying in bed on a Saturday morning, winter light coming grey and flat through the east-facing window. I reached over and tugged a piece of hair behind her ear. The most gentle thing, the most harmless thing, I thought. And she went very still. Not tense, just still, like a held breath. I pulled my hand back and said, "Too much?" She said, "Just give me a second," and I gave her a second. I lay there and looked at the ceiling, counted the seconds quietly in my head, and didn't fill the silence with apologies. I didn't offer explanations or reassurances because I was starting to understand that sometimes the most loving thing is to stop and wait. Let her be the one to come back. She came back after maybe 30 seconds, which felt longer than it should have. She reached over and took my hand, held it, and didn't have to say anything. I cried, and in the shower that day I kept thinking about all the years before me. All the years she'd spent learning to be still, learning to wait out her own body, and nobody had ever thought to ask her if she needed a second. And here I was, 3 years in, learning the most basic thing. It felt like being handed a map after you'd already walked the hardest part of the journey without one. We talked about it more over time, not always at night, sometimes in the car or over dinner. She would offer a piece when she was ready, and I learned to receive it without flinching. I learned not to make my reaction her responsibility to manage. That was the hardest part, honestly, keeping my face open and not letting my horror become something she had to comfort me for. There was an evening in February, maybe 3 months after she first told me. We were on the couch, her legs across my lap, watching something forgettable on television. She fell asleep before the second episode ended, and I sat in the blue light of the TV with her weight across me. I thought, she's safe here. She knows she's safe here. That's something, even if it's not everything. The lamp in the bedroom still flickers sometimes. I finally tightened the bulb, but it didn't fully fix it because something is loose in the socket itself. Nadia says she still likes it, and says it still feels like candlelight. Maybe you've been there, not in the exact same room, but in the same feeling. Loving someone and realizing the love you thought was enough is actually just the beginning. The real work isn't grand or visible. It's the 30 seconds of silence you hold without filling. It's the hand you pull back before she has to ask you to, and the question you remember to ask this time. We're still in that bedroom, the quilt still smells like cedar, and her glasses are still on my side of the nightstand. But I reach for her differently now, and she knows it. Some nights, when the lamp flickers and she turns toward me in the dark, I think that's the closest thing to getting it right. And I think that might be enough. Her glass is still on his side of the nightstand, and he reaches for her differently now, and she knows it. And some nights, that is enough. Not every story lands that gently. This next one starts with a sentence that probably seemed harmless. The kind of thing you say when you're trying to explain something without explaining too much. Some people like it rough. Casual. Conversational. The TV low in the background, some renovation show. His dad in the big duct tape chair, just sitting with his iced tea the way he sat with things. And then the room went very quiet. The question that came after wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. But it landed somewhere between, I don't understand what he just said, and I'm about to need you to say it again. And the narrator watched his father's face and understood, all at once, that he was going to have to go further in, not back out. What he said next, trying to clarify, trying to explain, is the part I still can't fully picture. And I'm not sure you'll be able to either, until you hear it. The TV was on when I walked in, some home renovation show, the volume low, the way my dad always left it when he was waiting up. He was in his chair, the big one, the armrest duct tape since 2009, never replaced because replacing it would mean admitting something. He had a glass of iced tea on the side table, and he was not drinking it, just sitting with it there, the way he sat with things. My dad, Terence, is not a man who asks questions. That is the central fact of him. He will sit with a problem for 3 days before he opens his mouth, and when he speaks, it's one sentence, either exactly right or wildly off. There is no in-between with him. When he's uncomfortable, he picks up whatever is nearest and turns it over in his hands. Once it was a decorative gourd my mother put out in October, and he studied it like the object was saying something we couldn't see. That night, he had the remote. It was a Thursday. I know it was a Thursday because I had worked a closing shift, which I only did on Thursdays. I remember pressing my thumb against the pin clasp in the car before I came inside, not to take it off, just to feel the point. The living room smelled like my mother's pot roast, warm and heavy. The kind of smell that means someone else's evening has been completely normal. There was a lamp in the corner with a slightly yellowed shade, making everything look like an old photograph. The renovation show was showing someone's kitchen before and after, the host gesturing at the backsplash like it was a miracle. I had been trying for 6 days to figure out how to say what I needed to say. I set my bag down by the door and didn't take my jacket off. I don't know why, maybe I thought it meant I could still leave. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said. The host on TV said something about subway tile. I sat down on the couch across from him and stared at the coffee table between us, carefully, like the details were anchors. There was a coaster, a TV guide from 2 weeks ago, and a small ceramic bowl my mother used for her keys. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Something happened." He set the remote down on the armrest, and that was how I knew he was paying attention. I had rehearsed this. I practiced it in my car, in the shower, and in the back room while I counted inventory. I had a version that was clear and linear, starting at the beginning and ending with what I needed from him, acknowledgement. That someone had done something to me without my permission, that it had happened, and that it was real. What I said instead was, there was this thing with at my friend Delia's party. Someone there did something without asking. My dad looked at me like he'd received the message, but the language was one he learned long ago. "Did someone hit you?" he said. "No," I said. No, it wasn't. It was more like, it was a touching thing," I said, and I stopped. He nodded slowly, the nod of a man who has understood nothing but doesn't want to say so yet. Like a fight, he said. Like someone grabbed you in a fight. I should have stopped right there, but I didn't. I kept going because I'd been carrying this for 6 days, and now I couldn't make myself stop. No, Dad, not a fight. He crossed the line, the kind you can't pretend wasn't crossed. I said no, more than once. It didn't matter, I said, and the words felt like they were scraping my throat raw. The remote came back into his hands. He turned it over once. At the party, he said. Yes. So, in front of people? No, it was... We'd gone to get drinks from the kitchen, and it was a hallway. Who was this person? He asked. His name is Marcus. He is Delia's... Does Delia know? Yes, I told her, but she... And she didn't do anything about it. She said she didn't think it was... She said I might have misread it. My dad's jaw moved, like he was holding something in his mouth that he hadn't decided what to do with yet. What did he touch? He said, not like a question, like a door he was slowly pushing open. I told him. I used the word I had to use. And I watched my father go completely, absolutely blank. Not angry, not horrified, just wiped clean. And you told him no, he said. Yes, I said, out loud. Yes, Dad, out loud, more than once. Another slow nod, and he kept turning the remote over and over. Then he said, well, why would you think that was... How did you end up alone with him in the hallway in the first place? I had known it was coming. I had prepared for it, and still it landed like something falling off a shelf at 3 a.m. That's not... I started. Dad, that's not how that works. I'm not saying it's an invitation, he said. I'm asking how the situation developed. The situation developed because he didn't ask, and he didn't listen when I told him to back off. I just don't understand, he said, why he would do that if there wasn't some kind of signal. You know that moment when you realize the conversation has completely gotten away from you? You came in needing one thing, and now you're responsible for explaining a thing you never thought you'd have to explain. I sat there a moment and looked at the carpet, memorizing the flattened tracks where the coffee table legs had sat for years. There was a small stain near the far edge, there since I was 9, and nobody talked about it. And then I made a decision. Okay, I said, I'm going to explain something to you, and I need you to just listen. He looked at me. Consent is not about signals. It's not about whether you went somewhere with someone. It's about whether someone explicitly says yes to a specific thing. That's it. If they don't say yes, or if they say no, then it doesn't matter what else happened before that moment. The answer is no, and going ahead anyway is a crime. My dad was very still. A crime, he said. Yes. Like, legally. Yes, Dad, legally. He picked up the iced tea, and he didn't drink it. He just held it. This Marcus is how old? 24. And he thought he could just... Yes, without asking. The renovation show moved on to a bathroom, and the host was saying the word spa-like with tremendous conviction. My dad put the tea down. Did anyone ever teach him different? He said, and I couldn't tell if he was asking about Marcus or about himself. The silence after that was specific. Not empty, but full of all the things now in the room with us that hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. He didn't apologize quickly. My dad processes, and the apology comes later in the form of action. He put both hands on his knees, the way he does when he's getting up, even though he didn't get up. So this Delia, he said, she didn't believe you. She said she didn't want to make it a whole thing. He made a low sound, not quite a word. You want me to do anything? He said. I don't know what I can do, but you want me to do anything? I just wanted to tell someone, I said. I just needed someone in this house to know. He nodded, the slow one. Okay, he said. I know. I stayed on that couch for another hour. He didn't talk much more. He watched the renovation show, and I watched it with him, until my mother came out in her robe for water. She asked, everything okay? And my dad said, yeah, we're just watching TV. She looked at us with that radar of a woman who knows something happened, and when she wasn't invited in, she said, "Okay, good night." My dad reached over and turned the volume up slightly, just enough. I don't know what he understood by the end of that night, or how much of what I said became useful. I know he asked one more question before I went to bed. "Is he going to be somewhere you have to see him?" "I don't know," I said, and he said, "Okay," and that was it. It wasn't enough. It wasn't the conversation I had needed, or the one I had practiced, or the one that would have made me feel safe and fully believed. It was a man doing his imperfect best with a language he'd never been taught, while a TV host explained tile. But he said, "I know." When I got up to go to bed, he said my name, Renata. Just my name, the way he says it when he means something. I stopped and he didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Sometimes the thing that costs the most to say is the thing that finally makes you feel like you exist. The kitchen light was still on when I passed it. Someone had left a dish towel folded on the counter. The faucet was dripping, the slow, patient kind of drip that means something needs fixing, something everyone has learned to sleep through. I stood there in the dark hallway and listened to it for a moment. Then I went to bed. He stood in a dark hallway, listening to a faucet drip. The kind of drip that doesn't get fixed, just absorbed, until the sound becomes part of the silence. Some weight doesn't announce itself. The next story starts with a drawer. A bottom drawer with a rule taped over it in the narrator's own handwriting. Don't open it. Old receipts, a birthday card, a photograph that couldn't be thrown away, but also couldn't be looked at. Years of keeping the rule. And then, at 16, something breaks the seal. What do you do when you finally open the drawer and the ache inside it is still fresh? The rule was, don't open the bottom drawer. I'd made that rule for myself sometime in February, after nights where I sat on my bedroom floor until 3 a.m. Old receipts, a birthday card, and a photograph I couldn't throw away, but also couldn't look at. After that night, I put everything back in the drawer, pushed it shut, and made the rule. Don't open it. Don't touch it. Don't think about what's in there. My name is Mara, and I want to tell you about the room first, because the room matters. It was small enough that you stop noticing it after a while. One window facing a brick wall. A radiator clanged twice every morning around 5 a.m., then went quiet like it was clearing its throat. The carpet was the color of old oatmeal, with a worn path from the door to the bed and the desk. There was a small closet where I kept my coat and my work bag, and not much else. I'd lived there for 2 years and made it livable with a thrifted quilt and a string of lights. I only turned those lights on when I was feeling particularly optimistic, and I had a succulent named Gerald. Gerald and I had an understanding. He didn't ask for much, and I didn't ask for much. I had routines, the way people who are barely holding it together always have routines. 6:15 alarm, then 6:20 actually get up, coffee in the white mug and not the blue one. I sat at the desk, not the bed, because if I sat on the bed, I'd lie back down. I scrolled through my phone for exactly 10 minutes, which always became 20, but the intention was 10. Then I got dressed and left before the thoughts had time to settle. That was the key. Leave before the thoughts had time to settle. Work was a data entry job for a logistics company I'd never cared about, and caring wasn't required. I sat in a beige cubicle and typed numbers into fields that didn't mean anything to me. I had 2 people I texted semi-regularly, Dani with memes and Priya, my old friend 3 states away. Other than that, I was mostly quiet, and I'd gotten good at quiet. That was the version of fine I'd built for myself, and it worked. Right up until the Tuesday in October. It was a Tuesday, it was raining, and I came home from work with wet socks and a headache behind my left eye. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and put the kettle on. The room smelled like rain through the cracked window sill and something faintly metallic from the radiator. I stood in the middle of it in my wet socks and thought, this is fine, this is just Tuesday. I was looking for my extra phone charger, the one I keep meaning to put somewhere logical. I checked the desk drawer, the nightstand, and the shelf above the closet. Then I crouched down and pulled open the bottom drawer. Not the bottom drawer. This was that bottom drawer. The birthday card was right on top. It was the last one she ever gave me. My mother, in her loopy left-tilting handwriting. She wrote, "You're doing better than you think, baby," and underlined, "Promise," twice. She died 14 months ago. 14 months and 11 days if you're counting. I sat on the carpet and held the card, and the room got very loud and very silent at the same time. Everything around me was still, but inside, I felt something moving fast, like a current I couldn't see. I hadn't cried at her funeral, or in the weeks after, or while packing up her apartment. My aunt stood in the doorway and said, "Mara, you don't have to do this alone." And I kept answering, "I'm fine." I'd said fine so many times it stopped being a word and became just a sound I made to make people leave. I put the card on the desk. I didn't put it back in the drawer. I made my tea, sat on the bed, and stared at the card from across the room for a long time. I tried to figure out whether it was going to hurt me or whether it already had. Then, because apparently I do this to myself, I picked up my phone and called Priya. It rang 4 times. Then she said, "Hey, oh my god, Mara, I was literally just thinking about you. Hold on." I said, "Of course, no worries." She called back 2 hours later, but by then, I turned my phone face down and I didn't pick up. I should have picked up. I know that. I knew it then. Grief makes you want to be alone, and it makes being alone unbearable at the same exact time. It's both, simultaneously, like 2 frequencies playing at once, and neither one resolving into music. I'd been carrying it for 14 months, the whole 14 months. I hadn't talked to anyone about the actual weight of it. My aunt offered to help me find a grief counselor, and I said I'd look into it. But looking meant admitting I needed it, and admitting meant sitting with the reason why. The reason why was the drawer. I couldn't afford therapy, and I checked once in a moment of honesty with myself. 6 months wait lists, or $180 a session, while my rent was $940 a month, and I was making $19 an hour. So I put it away too, into a different kind of drawer. The next few days were the kind that don't have a shape. I went to work, typed numbers into fields, came home, and ate microwaved soup standing over the sink. I slept badly, drifting in this grey in-between where my brain served memories like a waiter who wouldn't take no. The card stayed on the desk and I couldn't put it back or move it somewhere else. Each morning when I drank my coffee in the white mug, I caught it in my peripheral vision. "You're doing better than you think, baby. I promise." On the 3rd night, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. and I was crying before I was fully conscious. I lay there in the dark and let it happen, without trying to stop it. My mother used to say crying was the body's way of taking out its own trash. I thought, I haven't taken out the trash in 14 months. I want to be honest with you about what the days after that look like. There isn't some breakthrough I can point to, but on Saturday morning, I made my coffee in the white mug. I sat at the desk and looked at the card, and I didn't look away from it. I let the words be words instead of a wall I was running into. I got out a notebook and wrote, "She died, and I don't know who I am now, and I haven't told anyone that." Then I wrote, "I think I have to start talking about this somehow, even though I don't know how." I looked up free grief support groups online, and I found one virtual one on Thursday evenings. It wasn't therapy, it was just people talking about the thing. I didn't sign up that night, but I signed up the next morning before I had time to talk myself out of it. I haven't gone yet, and I'm telling you this now a few days before the first Thursday. I don't know what it'll be like or if it'll help, but I'm telling you because I'm here in this room. The oatmeal-colored carpet, the clanging radiator, and the card still on the desk. While I still can't afford $180 sessions. The grief is still there in my chest, like something that hasn't decided what it wants to be. I wrote the sentence and I'm talking about it now, to you, whoever you are. Maybe that counts for something. My mother underlined promise twice, and I think the not knowing and the still trying can exist in the same body. The string of lights is on above my window tonight, and Gerald is fine. I'm something less than fine and something more than nothing, and I'm learning that's where real living happens. The bottom drawer is still closed. For now, that's enough. It's almost 1 a.m. somewhere while you're watching this, And maybe you came here because you needed to hear that someone else has been in the dark too. There's a moment that keeps coming back to me. A father sitting across from his daughter, trying to find the words. He realizes he didn't have them, not because he didn't care, because no one had ever handed him the language either. That's the part nobody talks about, how the silence gets passed down before anyone even knows they're carrying it. And some of you are carrying things tonight that you've never said out loud. Not to a parent, not to a partner, not even to yourself, in the quiet, honest part of your mind. You found a way to hold it, and you're still here, which means something, even if you're not sure what. The question someone asked tonight, does the pain ever go away? I'm not going to lie to you and tell you yes. But I will tell you this, it changes shape, it stops being the whole room. Sometimes it becomes something you can set down, just for a little while. If any of these stories are yours, even the edges of them, even just the feeling, I want to hear from you. Leave it in the comments, you don't have to explain it. Sometimes one sentence is enough, and I read them. I'm here. And if you want to stay, there are more voices waiting. More people who said the thing they couldn't say anywhere else. Because the truest thing I know about secrets is this. They don't want to be kept forever. They want to find the one person who won't flinch.